Today's presentation is on WikiWatershed, an online toolkit for water resource managers, conservation practitioners, and municipal decision makers. The presenter today is Dr. David Arscott. Dave's an executive director and research scientist at the Stroud Water Research Center. He is a stream and river ecologist and has published research on riverine biodiversity, biogeochemistry, floodplain ecology, ecohydrology, and land-water interactions. He has field experiences that range across the U.S. and globally, from the European Alps to the Southern Alps, from the Arctic to the Antarctic, and in Central America. He received his PhD from the Swiss Federal Institute for Environmental Science and Technology, his MS from the University of New Hampshire, and his BS from Central Michigan University. Dave co-leads WikiWatershed and EnviroDIY.org initiatives with other Stroud Center team members. So welcome, Dave, and I'll open up the presentation area so you can start sharing your screen.
Okay, thank you for that introduction, Brian. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you to all of the folks that are joining today. I'm very excited to share with you some detailed information about WikiWatershed and our tools that are available online for free to anyone accessing WikiWatershed.org. WikiWatershed is this online toolkit for a variety of interested parties, and I'm going to spend most of my time today talking about and working with one of the applications that are available at WikiWatershed.org called Model My Watershed. Before I move to a live demonstration on that website, though, I just continue with a little bit of an introduction to the efforts that we are undertaking to make this all possible. Certainly, I am one member of a large team, and this product wouldn't be possible without our team members. Several other folks here at Stroud Water Research Center are involved in this project, as well as organizations, individuals, and companies around the country. Notably, Azavia in Philadelphia is a software developer company that we're working with that has just done a wonderful job with some of the tools that we are bringing you now. And then various folks across the country there that are important for helping with modeling efforts that you'll see, water quality and hydrology modeling efforts, as well as some of the other programming that's available, and our folks at Millersville and Concord Consortium helping with some educational activities for middle school and high school audiences. The WikiWatershed Toolkit has received significant funding from William Penn Foundation over the last couple years, as well as the National Science Foundation and Stroud Water Research Center, and certainly would like to acknowledge those funding sources. We have two ongoing projects funded by the National Science Foundation and William Penn Foundation that are active today. So WikiWatershed.org is a website, and this website is a place where we have a number of tools that are available for folks interested in water, water quality, water monitoring, and sharing information. I'm going to run through those tools very quickly in just a moment, introducing these different current resources. Model My Watershed is this watershed modeling web app that I'll spend most of the time today on. We have a educational vignette or animated storm model that helps us explain what's going on in Model My Watershed that we call the Model Microsite Runoff. There's our EnviroDIY initiative, which December 20th webinar, I will provide more detail about this open source, low-cost, do-it-yourself environment for water quality monitoring that we're involved with. The other vignettes that are available, or tools that are available at wikiwatershed.org, are Monitor My Watershed, our LeafPack network, and the Water Quality app. So at this point, I would like to flip over to a web browser and provide this live demonstration of WikiWatershed. So if you have a split screen monitor or two monitors as I do, you might watch the webinar as well as log into this website and complete a project alongside with what I'm going to show you today. So wikiwatershed.org, here's the landing page, and on the landing page we have access to these other tools that I've mentioned that you can explore more about each of those tools on your own. I'm going to spend the remainder of my time today within the Model My Watershed application. We will bounce back and forth between the application and the WikiWatershed page when I show you some different help resources and technical documentation is where we keep that material here at the website. So when you click on the launch button, you open a different web browser window that enters you into Model My Watershed. And if you have your location searching enabled, the location on this map should zoom into your local area. Model My Watershed is applicable to the entire continental United States. So what I'm going to show you today, you can do anywhere within the continental United States. So I've zoomed out here to show you the entire US. And I'll note a couple different points. When you first log in, you may have an account screen that appears, and you can sign up for an account for free, and if you have an account, then you can log in. You can continue as a guest. You don't have to have an account, but if you would like to save your projects and share them, you'll need an account to capture that and share it with other folks. Log in with ITSE is for our teachers across the country, and they use a different portal that enables or helps them with classroom exercises. Here I'm going to log in with my own account, and now I'm logged in. The first time you log in, you may have a set of questions that help us with some demographics and understanding who's using the site. So if you wouldn't mind filling out those demographics, that would greatly help us. And then we can return to Model My Watershed and get started. The first thing to explore here are the different palettes or tools that we can see. There are plus minus keys on the bottom right over here where we can zoom in and zoom out. There is a location key that will help locate, center the map to your location. And then there's this hide sidebar to create a window that's full of your map versus having the sidebar active. To the left is the sidebar, and there's this other toolbar here called Layers that you can minimize or enlarge. And on the Layers tab, there are different geographic data layers that you can visualize. Here I'm turning on the continental medium US medium resolution stream network, and you'll notice that as I zoom in, the detail of the streams layer increases so that we can begin to see some of the small headwater streams on the map. There are several other layers to explore here, and I will explore with you during some of the projects that I'm going to run through. Before I do that, we'll come over here to the Base Maps tab and show you that we have a street view here. That's the entry point, and then we can switch to a satellite view or satellite with roads or a terrain map. And each of these are pulling up different free mapping systems from various sources. This one is from map data from Google. Some of the other ones are Esri and OpenStreetMap. So I'll keep the terrain map open and move from this Layers tab to the left sidebar here, Explore, Analyze, and Model Human Impacts on Your Watershed. So Model My Watershed enables us to use a few different models to look at how water moves through the landscape and how nitrogen, phosphorus, and sediment may come off the landscape and enter our waterways. The first feature I will zoom to here is I'm going to go up to the right corner in our search box, and I'm going to search for Allegheny. And when I start typing, you'll see a number of options that we can select on. If you don't know what a Huck basin is, this is a hydrologic unit code that's standardized by the USGS at the national level. And a Huck 8 is a coarse resolution watershed area or watershed unit. And the Huck 10 and Huck 12s are finer scale watershed units. So keep typing Allegheny, and I'm going to choose the middle Allegheny River as or the upper Allegheny River as a Huck 8. And when we do that, that watershed area is instantly highlighted and shaded here in pink. And you'll notice in the search window up in the right, there's a button that's called Select. If I select that button, there are algorithms running underneath that will query this landscape and and analyze that landscape for a variety of features. The first feature that pops up here is land cover distribution. So this data layer is from the National Land Cover Database from 2011. And if you'd like to turn that database on to see that landscape in those colors, you can do so right here very easily. So now we have the land use map turned on, and we can see the color codes here in the bar chart represented in our landscape. So this urban area is red and pink, and the forested areas are green. The farmed areas are brown and yellow, depending on whether it's row crop or hay pasture. We get a tabular breakdown below the bar chart of the land use for this entire area. And we have access to download these data as well. And when one downloads those data, you have a comma-separated file that contains those data, and you can save those to your desktop for later, if you like. In addition to the land cover data layer, there's a soils data layer, which shows us the hydrologic soil group. And this comes from the USDA's GSERGO database, 2016. And we can turn that layer on as well, get a color code map, and visualize those hydrologic soil groups for our region. These are important to note because they influence how water and material moves through watersheds, and they range from very high infiltration soils to very slow infiltration soils. And again, we can download those data. When we click that button, you can download a comma delimited file containing those data for your watershed. The next tab is an Animals tab. Go back and turn this off. Nothing to visualize here with the estimated number of farming animals, but these data come from the USDA's farm census at the county level. And we can see an estimate of the county level census data distributed across our watershed based on the agricultural land use in this watershed. It's important to note the nature of these data sources so you can better understand how these data are being served to you. And at any point in time, if you have questions about where these data come from, you can click on this little information symbol and open up our technical documentation on the WikiWatershed website. Do that for the land cover. I have a feeling it's opening it in a different browser. Sorry, it's over here. under Documentation, Reference Document should appear. And here is where you can find all of the technical documentation for each of these data layers. So for the animal data layer, if you wish to follow the links back to where we're finding these data, you can click on the link and get to the raw data source this way. For land cover and soils information, these are on the coverage grid tab. We can access those raw data or the website hosting those raw data from these links. All right, back to our project area. The next tab here to explore is point sources. These come from the EPA permitted point source NPDES layer. And when we highlight any one of these, we can see the permitted point source and what sort of discharges, total nitrogen, and total phosphorus loads are being reported to the EPA for those point source discharge sites. Again, you can download those data and keep them for later if you wish. This water quality tab is one I will come back to when we have a project within the Delaware River Basin. We have some enhanced tools that are available within the Delaware River Basin that are at the request of the William Penn Foundation's project called the Delaware River Watershed Initiative that I'll show you if we have time at the end here. So before we continue on with the workflow and select a model, I'd just like to step back and show you a couple different ways of selecting a project area. The first example was to type in the search box Allegheny up here and select the watershed that came up with that. There are other options. We can select by boundaries, and this tool activates some red outlined polygons that are representative of the subbasin Huck 8 level. And when you mouse over the map, you'll see the name of those subwatersheds activate. And if you click on those subwatersheds, you will select the area and process the land use, soils, and other information. There are other tools. You can draw your own area with the free draw tool. You could plop down a square kilometer anywhere on the map, or you could choose to delineate your watershed using by placing a point on the map and using the medium resolution stream network. And when I use this tool, it's helpful to zoom in to an area on the map that we would like to define our watershed at, and click near the stream. It doesn't have to be right on the stream. This tool will take that point and move it downslope to the stream channel, and then use an underlying digital elevation model to delineate the topographically defined watershed boundary upstream from that point, and it will clip out the land cover, soils, and other data for us to work with. All right, from this point, let me go back one more time and re-highlight the upper Allegheny. And now I'm going to select a model to model water and water quality in this very large basin. For the first example, I'm going to select the Watershed Multi-Year Model. This model simulates 30 years of daily precipitation data that rain down on this watershed and move through the watershed. And of course, my area of interest is too large, so I'm going to go back and select a smaller boundary. Within the upper Allegheny. And now when I run the model on this smaller watershed, this is in effect running a model that's also called MapSheds that was developed by Barry Evans and others out of Penn State. Barry Evans is also an adjunct at the Water Research Center and is helping implement MapShed routines within Model My Watershed that are now our watershed multi-year model. So the results that are presented to us are presented in two tabs, hydrology and water quality. And the very first tab we see here has precipitation. So this is the average precipitation over the last 30 years by month, projected here on this graph for each month of the year. And data are reported in a table down below, and again, you can download those data. We can see precipitation, estimates of EP, or evapotranspiration, surface runoff, subsurface flow, point source flow, and stream flow with this modeling routine. So these estimates are modeled based on the current 2011 land use and the soils data layers that we previously explored. In addition to the hydrologic side of the modeling effort that's conducted here, MapShed also provides estimates of water quality, specifically sediment yield, total nitrogen, and phosphorus that comes off these landscapes. I'll put the land cover grid back on for us to view. You can reorganize the table and sort by the sediment, nitrogen, or phosphorus estimates. And below this table that is listing estimates specific to each source in the watershed, we have a table that summarizes the total loads, the loading rates, mean annual concentration estimates, and the mean low flow concentrations. Now, at any time in any of your projects, if you'd like to explore any of the accuracy of these data layers that we've put in, you can do that by changing the transparency of the land cover data set. And if you've also selected perhaps the satellite with road layer, then we can begin to zoom in and see how the land use data layer has classified the landscape based on the aerial imagery beneath it, so that you can verify any location on your map as to the proper representation of the land cover. You can also use the slider for this hydrologic soil groups and change the transparency of that coverage grid. I'm going to zoom back out, and you can see our entire area of interest. At any time, using the watershed multi-year model, we can export a file that's called a GMS file. And for those of you who are familiar with MapShed executable that you can download for free off of the Penn State website and have used MapShed, this data file is a data file you can use to then continue your analysis in the GWLFE MapShed desktop model if you wish. Again, more information can be gained by clicking on the Information tab here. We can see the details of our analysis as a reminder for the size of our watershed and which model we've run by clicking on Details. If you're logged in and have that free account, you can change this project title. You can rename the title to anything you'd like, and then you can share that and make it public and send a link to anyone else that's using Model My Watershed. So we've run the first set of this model and projected water quality loads coming out of this watershed. What if we are proposing some very large-scale work in this watershed to improve water quality and reduce sediment, nitrogen, and phosphorus loads using several best management practices? The model allows us to begin to estimate those changes based on some work we may have in the watershed. So by clicking on this Conservation Practices tab over here, I've opened a new scenario, and now I can implement rural and urban best management practices. Rural best management practices range from cover cropping, conservation tillage, nutrient managed livestock waste, etc., as you can read across here. And urban BMPs currently loaded are vegetative buffer strips, stream bank stabilization, surface water retention areas, and infiltration bioretentions. When you click on any one of these, there's a little information dialog below that explains the best management practice, and when we click on it, we'll see that for this cover cropping area, this area of interest has 705 hectares of row crops in the watershed, and we can modify a certain number of those. Say we have a project to modify 200 hectares within this watershed to implement cover cropping. When we hit apply, it will rerun the model, and you have to wait a couple seconds for the model to update. And now you will have an updated table of loadings based on implementing this cover crop, 200 acres. And if you wish to remove it, you can click the trash button, or you can continue adding other strategies, nutrient management, to those same acres or hectares. And again, when you apply, the model will update the table for new estimates of total phosphorus, nitrogen, and sediment loading, and so on. You can continue to add best management practices for your area of interest to explore the changes to the model. Let's try an infiltration basin. We have 1,008 hectares, 1,300 hectares of urban area. Let's do 250 of those in infiltration or bioretention. That's a fairly aggressive management plan. And the model updates. All right, keeping track of time here, I'd like to move out and start a new project and use a different model. There are other things to explore within the watershed multi-year model that maybe we'll come back to, but for now, I'm going to start a new project. And I'm going to zoom in to an area that has a little bit of a urban influence. Let's go to Erie. And we'll zoom into an area on the edge of town here. And I'd like to draw an area of a neighborhood that I'm interested in working in. In this case, we'll draw an area of interest around this neighborhood. we can see this is a fairly developed neighborhood with, what is this, 71% low intensity development and 27% open space development. And at this point, we can again turn on the land cover database to see the classifications, the soils. These are mostly urban soils, so we have a different classification for urban soils that don't show up on the overlay. There shouldn't be any animals here because we don't have any agricultural land, and I don't think there are any point sources in this area. So for this example, I'm going to select the site storm model. Now, this model uses some different algorithms, TR55 and SLAM, as well as the EPA Step L water quality spreadsheet model. And this model doesn't use a historic precipitation record, but allows you to dial in a precipitation intensity that is reflective of rain falling over the last 24 hours. It's currently in centimeters, so the base setting is about 1 inch of rain that comes down, 2.5 centimeters on this square area. And with that 24-hour hypothetical storm event, SLAM and TR55 algorithms process that precipitation coming through this landscape into infiltration, runoff, and evapotranspiration, and provide the tabular form of those data down below. There's a water quality model that runs right alongside the hydrologic model. That's the EPA's Step L model algorithms that predicts total suspended solids, total nitrogen, and total phosphorus loads that would come off this landscape. So this is based on the 2011 land use and urban soils beneath this square area. And now I can begin to make changes to this area if I have some project work going on. When I click on Make Changes, it starts a new scenario. And we have a couple different options, land cover or conservation practices. So I could change land cover. I can replace any of the land cover areas within that polygon with a new land cover. So if we have an area where we know we are going to have an opportunity to extend a forest patch for one reason or another, we can draw that area into this project. And when we close the polygon, the model updates for both runoff and water quality. So we can do that for a variety of land covers and conservation practices. In this neighborhood, projects might range more from green roofs to rain gardens to perhaps porous pavings, or new cluster housing might be applicable in this neighborhood. If we have a number of rain gardens going in, we can begin to draw some of these rain gardens wherever we like on the landscape. Every time we implement one, we close a polygon, we have to draw a new polygon for a rain garden, and so on. One could continue planning rain gardens within this area and updating the model. There's a modifications tab that keeps track of all your modifications. If you make a mistake, you can delete any of those practices. Now, one nice feature of using the site storm model that we don't have implemented yet in the Watershed multi-year model is this compare option. When we click on the compare, we have a side-by-side pop-up window that compares our scenarios to one another, so we can see if the best management practices and land uses that we've implemented have made a substantial change to any of the model outputs. So here we're comparing predominantly forested. If there was no neighborhood there and the polygon was forested, this is how the model would project for runoff, evapotranspiration, infiltration based on a 2.5 centimeter storm, current conditions, and then our new scenario with our conservation practices. So we can see each of those components isolated or in a stacked bar at the top. And when we click on water quality, we have a similar presentation of total suspended solids, total nitrogen, and total phosphorus. In this case, I haven't added too many changes to that polygon, but the changes that I did implement reduce the total suspended solids by about 1/10 of a kilogram per hectare, and over here about 3/100ths of a kilogram per hectare total nitrogen, and so on for total phosphorus. We can also increase this 24-hour precipitation event to have a look at how these model projections change based on the 24-hour precipitation event. All right, I see that I am just about out of time and would like to open up for some questions. There's a lot more to explore here, and with the last new project, I will zoom into the Delaware River area and share with you a few features that we have that are active in the Delaware River watershed area. I'm going to select the Schuylkill watershed as an example. Now, if we're within the Delaware River watershed, we have a couple other data layers that are available. Here we see the continental U.S. medium resolution stream network. We have also generated a high resolution stream network to really accentuate the very smallest of potential stream channels in our watersheds. We've also added some tools that come from a different modeling effort at the Academy of Natural Sciences that's called the Stream Reach Assessment Tool that help project nitrogen, phosphorus, and sediment concentrations within these stream channels throughout the Delaware River area, and those streams then get colored different color code based on the model's estimates of those concentrations. So you can begin to see some hot spots where one may want to focus some efforts for improvements if we're trying to reduce total nitrogen, total phosphorus, or total sediment. There's both streams that can be activated as well as shaded catchment areas that show those contributing areas to those stream channels and projecting total nitrogen loads. So I could continue on here to show you more enhanced features within the Delaware, but I'll put a plug in for a webinar we're having tomorrow from the Stroud Water Research Center. You could log in to another webinar at noon, and I will go through more advanced features for the Delaware River Watershed Initiative. You can find out how to connect to that on our WikiWatershed.org website by clicking on events and seeing that we have a webinar here scheduled for tomorrow, and details to connect can be found through that link. I guess before I open up for a few questions before the end, I'll just remind you all that we do have plenty of resources and tools to help better understand and learn how to use Model My Watershed on our website here. You can click on Help. And explore tutorials to learn more about the storm site model and the microstorm. There are videos here. Webinars like this webinar will be posted on the video page. And again, When you open this technical documentation reference document, you will get to a very detailed explanation of every data layer that's available, as well as what are the models we've actually implemented. If you want to learn more about this site storm model and what is SLAM, the Source Loading Management Model, or TR55, or EPA Step L, there's resources here to learn more about these models and how we've implemented them within Model My Watershed. Likewise, for the Watershed multi-year model, there's quite a bit of documentation on this model within this tutorial, as well as links to the resources that Barry Evans posted on the Penn State servers for MapShed. So with that, I will open up for questions, and maybe Brian can help field these questions, and we'll see what we can cover if you have questions.
Yep, thanks, Dave. And I did just open up the first poll question for folks to answer just how much you learned today from the webinar. And we have a number of questions about the specifics of the model and the tool, and one of them you answered at the bottom there was about written guidelines on how to use the program, and you just showed where you can get to those, both written and video resources. There was a question in here about the watershed sizes that you can use. Now, obviously, I guess you can draw any watershed boundary in this, but can you go, or how small of a HUC unit can you go down to in a standard form?
I believe we have HUC units 8, 10, and 12 that are automatic HUC delineations. But you can also delineate very small areas with the Delineate Watershed Area tool. And that uses a digital elevation model to draw a line around the topographically defined boundary. And it should clip out the land use layers and allow you to run models. We have limited the maximum size that one can delineate and run a model on, primarily for a data server issue that's a lot of data to be serving out to people, and that decision of you can't model the entire Mississippi River watershed. You saw that I had a timeout for the upper Allegheny watershed. When we expand the area of interest to that size, the models that we've implemented on Model My Watershed are not as appropriate to apply as other models that are out there. So twofold reason: one is serving you data, and two is the scale at which is most appropriate to implement these models.
Okay, thanks. I'll pull up the last poll question here, and there are a couple of questions in here about whether you can use English units as opposed to metric.
Yes, and we hope to have that available in the next couple months. That will probably appear as an option within your user profile once we implement it.
And a question about, can this be linked to NRCS TR55 watershed hydrology model?
So yes, it already is, I believe. I know I showed you the site storm model, and the site storm model is implementing the TR55 algorithms, but with some changes that we've documented. That model is most applicable to rural and forested landscapes, so we've added the SLAM components for including urbanized landscapes. And again, that documentation is available in that tutorial document that I showed you.
And can you see direct source discharges that hold an NPDES permit as well?
Yes, so once you select an area of interest within the United States, you will see point sources as one of the outputs if you have point sources within your area of interest. Now for the Delaware River watershed, yes, I could share that again here. For the Delaware River watershed, we have, change the area, implemented a graphic that will show you with these orange dots, they're pretty small, it might be hard to see with a screen share, but each permitted point source from the NPDES database is geographically displayed within the Delaware River, and you can click on those small dots. This layer is not applicable to the rest of the United States. However, when you select a boundary anywhere else, you will, if there are permitted discharges within that boundary, they should appear under point sources here. And I selected an area that has no point sources. So that should answer that question, though.
And the question about, can you look up information by municipal boundary or other sub-county boundary?
Yes, there are plenty of other features that I didn't have time to get into. You can select your boundary by these hydrologic unit codes, county lines, and they're in faint red here. Dauphin, Perry, Juniata, you can do the whole county. Congressional districts, school districts are select by boundary. And we have also implemented visualization of county lines. I think you can see the red lines there. Congressional districts, school districts, PA municipalities. And then there is another coverage grid here that is the Pennsylvania urbanized areas, which help us define our MS4 permitting regions. If you know that infrastructure or language or regulatory environment, that's the gray shaded areas here. Next question.
There were some questions about the recording of this webinar, and we will have this posted. I did put the URL in the chat box there, and then I believe Dave also said you'll be posting the recording on the WikiWatershed site. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And it'll probably be, it may take a day or two till we can get that posted, but it'll be up on the website soon. Some of these questions we've already answered. Is there any interest in putting together a demo or training program for a specific area or watershed group?
Yes, we are able to offer those sorts of workshops or further trainings. You can contact me directly. We have some funding from Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection's Growing Greener program through a program called Seesaw, Consortium for Scientific Assistance to Watershed Organizations, and we could easily arrange to offer local workshops on using this tool.
And several different comments in here, some nice comments about the usefulness of this tool. One here about, will this model be expanded to include any sections of the Susquehanna River watershed? I believe you said it's already for all of Pennsylvania, correct?
Yeah, you know, all of the modeling framework and tools can be done nationally. There are some features that are only available in the Delaware River watershed, primarily because of funding, and the fact that making them available throughout Pennsylvania or nationally would require more funding for us to expand the geographic coverage. So we hope to make these features available nationally, but there are some that are just limited to the Delaware at the moment.
And there's two questions here that are kind of related. One says adding a conservation practice of urban tree plantings or something of that sort might be very helpful in the urban site stormwater analysis. The model may not be able to currently do so, but could be a future use as it advances. And then a similar question is, can you add your own layers like for trees?
So the best way to mimic that would be to use the land use change to forest. Now, an urbanized tree planting area may be hydrologically and water quality based in a different way than a true deciduous or coniferous forest, but using that feature could mimic that best management practice for a first estimate. We are in the process of expanding more of the MapShed best management practices within this tool, and we're constantly updating this tool, so please stay tuned over the next year to see how these features and options expand.
And maybe just two more quick questions. One is there a way to input latitude, longitude coordinates to jump to a coordinate?
I believe if you get those correct up here in the search window, it will take you there, but I haven't done it myself lately. There is one other very helpful feature. If you are a GIS user and you know what a shapefile is or a GeoJSON file, these are polygons from a GIS system like Esri's ArcGIS, where you can use your shapefile to select an area of interest. And of course, you can only upload one polygon at a time. But I'm showing this upload file feature where you can then go and find your file either as a zip. I've already done one here. This is a shape file that I just exported for the Brandywine River. And instantly upon upload, it shows me that polygon and clips the land use area.
Okay, well, we've reached the end of our hour here, so I want to thank Dave. And Dave, there was at least one question in here about how folks can get in touch with you for specific training or questions. So I guess if you're willing, you can put any contact information in the chat box there for folks to get in touch with you. But thank you very much for a great presentation, a big crowd today, and lots of interest, lots of questions. That's always good to see. And just a reminder that Dave will be back along with another presenter from Stroud on December the 20th to talk about another one of their tools. So thanks for everybody for attending, and Dave, thanks again for a great webinar.
Thank you for hosting it, and thank you all for attending.
Have a good day, everybody.